Darkness, silence, a solitary streetlight flickered, casting long dancing shadows. A chill wind howled through the ancient oak trees. Beneath the rustling leaves, a different kind of story brewed, a story whispered in hushed tones, a story about a game. Not just any game, this one was different. This one was cursed. They called it the Haunted Cartridge. An old game for a system long forgotten. No one knew its origins, only that it appeared on dusty shelves, in forgotten corners of antique stores. Appearing as if by magic, a game shrouded in whispers and shadowed in darkness. Local legends spoke of strange occurrences surrounding the game, of players driven mad, haunted by images they couldn't explain. Some even whispered of disappearances, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the chilling glow of a powered-on console. But legends are just that, stories, right? No one could prove the game was truly cursed. No one dared to try. The air crackled with anticipation, a sense of foreboding hanging thickly. A young man, Jake, sat cross-legged on the floor, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and unease. Before him lay a vintage gaming console, dusted off and resurrected from his attic, a relic from a bygone era. Tonight was different. Tonight was the night he dared to play the game that had been shrouded in mystery and whispers. He'd found the cartridge at a flea market, tucked away in a box of forgotten treasures, its label faded and almost unreadable. The vendor had been hesitant, his eyes filled with a strange mix of fear and warning, as if he knew something Jake didn't.
"Be careful with this one, son," he'd rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper that sent chills down Jake's spine. "Some games are best left unplayed," the old man had warned, his eyes dark and serious.
Jake had scoffed at the time, dismissing it as just an old man's superstition, a relic of a bygone era. But as he connected the console, a shiver ran down his spine. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with a palpable tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath. He pushed the thought aside, attributing it to nerves. He was about to experience gaming history after all, a piece of the past brought back to life. The screen flickered to life, bathing the room in an eerie blue light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. A pixelated title screen materialized, the game's name scrawled in a jagged font, Eternal Darkness, a name that seemed to echo in the silence. Beneath it, a single ominous command, play, as if daring him to cross a threshold. He pressed start, and the game began, the screen shifting and warping as if the very fabric of reality was being altered. Jake's eyes were glued to the screen, his fingers moving almost instinctively, drawn deeper into the game's dark narrative. The game world was dark and twisted, filled with unsettling imagery and eerie sounds that seemed to seep into his very soul. As he played, a growing sense of dread began to creep over him, the old man's warning echoing in his mind. Suddenly, a disturbing event in the game made him jump, his heart racing as he realized this was no ordinary game. Determined to uncover the game's secrets, Jake pressed on, each level more harrowing than the last. Finally, he reached the final level, the culmination of his journey, the ultimate test of his resolve. With intense focus, he prepared to face the final challenge, the dark secret that lay at the heart of eternal darkness. The final boss loomed before him, a monstrous entity that seemed to embody all his fears. With a surge of determination, Jake fought with all his might, finally defeating the entity and uncovering the game's dark secret. As the screen faded to black, a sense of relief washed over him. He had conquered the game, but the experience had left its mark. He looked at the console, now silent and still, and couldn't help but wonder about the old man's warning, some games are best left unplayed. The game was simple, a side-scrolling adventure through a dark, pixelated world. Jake controlled a nameless hero, guiding him through shadowy forests and decaying castles. The graphics were crude, the soundtrack a haunting melody that sent shivers down his spine. At first it was just a game, but as the hours passed, something changed. The shadows on the screen seemed to deepen, to writhe with a life of their own. The music grew more intense, punctuated by strange whispers and disembodied screams. He started noticing glitches too, flickering images, distorted faces that appeared for a split second before vanishing. Once he swore he saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at him from the screen.
He tried to rationalize it. An old game likely riddled with bugs. But a seed of doubt had been planted. A creeping sense of unease that whispered something was wrong. Very wrong.
He pressed on, drawn deeper into the game's chilling embrace. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the edges of the screen. Section 4, The Attic Discovery, Unveiling the Truth.
A sudden crash of thunder startled Jake, jolting him back to reality. The sound was so loud and unexpected that it felt like the very walls of the house were shaking. His heart raced as he tried to steady his breathing. The storm outside had intensified, mirroring the growing unease within him. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in brief, eerie bursts, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. The wind howled, as if trying to communicate some ancient, forgotten warning. He paused the game, the silence deafening after the unsettling soundtrack. He needed a distraction. The game, once a source of comfort, now felt like an intrusion into his already frazzled mind. He glanced around the room, searching for something, anything to take his mind off the storm and the strange feeling gnawing at him.
He decided to investigate the attic, the source of the vintage console. The attic had always been a place of mystery, filled with the remnants of his family's past. He had always been curious about what lay hidden in its shadows, but tonight, that curiosity felt more like a compulsion. As he climbed the creaking stairs, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn somewhere, led by an unseen force. Each step seemed to echo louder than the last, the sound reverberating through the old house. The air grew colder and he could feel the weight of the years pressing down on him. The attic was dark and dusty, filled with the forgotten relics of a bygone era. Old trunks, covered in cobwebs, stood like silent sentinels guarding their secrets. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories.
He rummaged through old boxes, his fingers tracing the outlines of forgotten toys and faded photographs. Each item he touched seemed to whisper stories of the past, tales of joy and sorrow, of lives lived and lost. He felt a strange connection to these objects, as if they were a part of his own history. And then he found it. A moment of clarity amidst the chaos. His hand brushed against something solid and cold, hidden beneath layers of dust and time. Tucked away in a dusty corner, hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers, was a wooden chest. It looked ancient, its surface worn and weathered, yet it held an undeniable allure. It was ornately carved, its surface cold and smooth to the touch. The intricate designs seemed to tell a story of their own, a tale of craftsmanship and care. He could feel the weight of history in his hands as he traced the carvings with his fingers. He lifted the heavy lid, his heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and dread. The hinges creaked in protest, as if reluctant to reveal the secrets they guarded. The air inside the chest was musty, filled with the scent of old paper and leather.
Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a leather-bound journal. It looked fragile, its cover worn and cracked with age. The sight of it filled him with a sense of reverence and anticipation. Its pages were filled with frantic, scrawled handwriting. The ink had faded over time, but the urgency of the words was still palpable. Each page seemed to pulse with the emotions of the writer, a window into a mind long gone. He opened it, his eyes scanning the faded ink. The words were a jumble of thoughts and emotions, a chaotic stream of consciousness that spoke of fear, hope, and desperation. He could feel the weight of the writer's experiences pressing down on him. What he read sent a chill down his spine. The journal spoke of things he could barely comprehend, of events and emotions that seemed to transcend time and space. It was as if the writer had reached out from the past to share their deepest secrets with him, and he felt an overwhelming sense of connection and responsibility. Section 5. Deeper into the Abyss. The game's grip tightens. The atmosphere was thick with an unsettling tension, a palpable sense of dread that seemed to seep from the very walls.
The journal belonged to a young man named Samuel, the previous owner of the game. Samuel had been an avid gamer, always on the lookout for the next big thrill, the next challenge to conquer. His words painted a terrifying picture, a descent into madness fueled by the game's sinister influence. Each page was a testament to his growing obsession, his mind slowly unraveling as he delved deeper into the game's dark secrets. Samuel wrote of the same glitches, the same unsettling feeling of being watched. The game seemed to have a life of its own, its code twisting and warping in ways that defied explanation. But his entries grew progressively darker, filled with paranoia and fear. He spoke of shadows that moved on their own, of whispers that seemed to come from the very air around him. He believed the game was haunted, that it was a conduit to another realm, a realm where the boundaries between reality and nightmare were blurred, where the rules of the physical world no longer applied. He described being tormented by nightmares, haunted by the pixelated creatures from the game. These creatures, once mere digital constructs, seemed to take on a life of their own, invading his dreams and turning them into horrific visions. He wrote of strange occurrences in his waking life, objects moving on their own, whispers in the dead of night. It was as if the game had reached out beyond the screen, its malevolent influence seeping into the real world. The line between the game and reality was blurring, and he was being dragged down with it. His grip on sanity was slipping, the game pulling him deeper into its dark embrace.
Jake's blood ran cold. The more he read, the more he felt the same creeping dread that had consumed Samuel. The words on the page seemed to pulse with a dark energy, each sentence a step further into the abyss. He'd dismissed the legends as mere superstition, but now he wasn't so sure. The coincidences were too many, the details too precise. It was as if Samuel's experiences were a dark mirror of his own. Samuel's words were too real, too specific to be mere fantasy. Each entry was a cry for help, a desperate attempt to make sense of the horrors he was experiencing. He was holding the ramblings of a madman driven to the brink by the very game he was playing. But were they truly the ravings of insanity, or a warning of the darkness that lay ahead?
He had to know more. He had to understand the truth behind the game, the truth that had consumed Samuel. The journal was a puzzle, each piece a fragment of a larger, more terrifying picture. He returned to the console, a sense of foreboding washing over him. The room seemed to close in around him, the shadows growing longer and darker. He was no longer playing a game. He was stepping into a world where the rules of reality no longer applied, where the game and the nightmare were one and the same. He was entering a nightmare that had claimed Samuel, and now threatened to claim him as well. The grip of the game was tightening, and there was no escape.